Bank earnings season is testing Canadian financials as TSX futures hold steady, giving dividend-focused TFSA holders a window to reassess exposure. This is Modern Investing Techniques, episode 151. Quick reminder, everything we discuss here is for education and entertainment. The practice investment of the day uses simulated trades with no real money. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. Always do your own research before putting real money to work. The S&P 500 closed at 7,709, up 0.4%. The Nasdaq Composite reached 26,409, up 1.1%. The TSX Composite finished at 36,704, down 0.3%. Tech leadership on NVIDIA developments contrasts with Canadian bank results dominating attention on the TSX. The Fed's September decision remains uncertain, according to recent commentary from former officials. Our simulated portfolio stands at a cumulative $305.98 across 56 trades, at a 54% win rate. The matched window alpha versus the Nasdaq sits at plus 0.8% across 5 rules-based trades since the record began on August 18, 2026. Earnings reports from growth names like robotics and mining developers offer a repeatable way to capture short-term alpha when results beat expectations on both revenue and project milestones. Today's filings from Kraken Robotics and several gold-copper developers show how second quarter updates can shift sentiment quickly in small-cap names. Screen for companies that pair positive earnings with concrete project catalysts, such as equipment financing, letters of interest, or lifted suspensions. Enter only if volume exceeds the 20-day average on the reaction day. This approach has historically worked best in the first 48 hours after release, before broader sector rotation takes over. Risk comes from low-float names that gap and reverse on thin volume, so always set a hard stop at the pre-report low. Use your broker's earnings calendar filter plus volume scanner to surface candidates each quarter. Kraken Robotics filed its unaudited consolidated financial statements and management discussion and analysis for the 3 and 6 months ended June 30th, 2026 on SEDAR+. Investors can cross-reference those documents directly with the company's project pipeline to gauge whether reported results translate into near-term cash visibility. The same filter applies to names releasing metallurgical test data or export credit support updates on the same day. This flash trade on Kraken Robotics demonstrates how to isolate an earnings catalyst from sector noise by requiring volume confirmation on the reaction day. The pick is PNG.V, Kraken Robotics, on the TSX venture. The catalyst is the second quarter 2026 financial results filed with potential for positive project updates. Watch for volume above the 20-day average on the open, with nearest resistance at recent highs. Thin float volatility could produce quick reversal, so the stop sits at the pre-release low and limits loss to roughly 8 to 10%. The target is plus 2% to plus 4% intraday if volume confirms. Confidence is medium because the earnings catalyst is live, but sector rotation into broader tech may cap follow-through. This is a simulated trade for educational purposes only. Yesterday's weekly hold on TLG delivered a clear alpha outcome because volume stayed elevated through the entire window. The position entered at $2.05 on the Thursday open and exited at $2.31 on the Wednesday close. That produced a gain of 12.68%, or $126.83 on a $1,000 position. Over the same 6 calendar day window, the Nasdaq rose approximately 2.8%, so the trade generated 9.88% alpha versus the benchmark. The drilling extension 400 meters beyond the current resource pit shell drove the move. What this teaches us is that catalyst-driven names already in a sector rotation need volume above the 20-day average before entry. Upgrading from OTCQB to OTCQX gives Canadian issuers broader U.S. investor visibility and tighter spreads without full NYSE listing costs. Investors gain easier access to names like Astra Exploration through standard U.S. brokerage accounts once the upgrade is complete. Check your broker's international trading desk or OTC markets platform for eligibility. The upgrade removes the previous OTCQB trading restrictions and places the company on the OTCQX Best Market, which carries higher disclosure standards. Canadian investors holding the TSXV listing can now route U.S. orders through the same account without needing a separate cross-border custodian. Third-party labs such as Capis, Cassiday, and Associates run bottle roll tests that quantify recovery rates across different host rocks, directly informing feasibility studies and mine planning. Retail investors following junior developers can use these results to separate viable projects from conceptual ones before committing capital. Review the full test parameters in the company's press release rather than headline recovery percentages alone. Blossom Gold announced initial bottle roll test results from multiple host rock types and alteration styles from both oxidized and fresh rock at the Rosebud project. The test work program is designed to define recovery characteristics for the major host rocks ahead of mine planning and feasibility studies. The preventive suspension at Patagonia Gold's Argentine project has been lifted after an agreement on local worker hiring and training, allowing operations to resume. The company also announced the third Doré dispatch from the project. This removes an operational overhang that had previously halted certain activities at the flagship Calcatrio site in Rio Negro province. Add PGDC.V to a watch list for volume confirmation on the first full day of resumed activity. Troilus announced a non-binding letter of interest for up to $132 million in export credit support from Finvera for Mezzo equipment at its Quebec gold-copper project. The letter remains subject to final documentation and is tied to equipment procurement announced 2 days earlier. Monitor TLG.TO for sustained volume above the 20-day average before considering any new position. Raymond James raised its NVIDIA price target to $515. The new target implies a roughly $13 trillion market cap and reflects continued confidence in the AI infrastructure build-out. Trim any oversized NVDA exposure if the stock fails to hold above its 20-day moving average on the next pullback. TSX futures are holding near flat as investors digest Canadian bank results amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. Hold CAD cash in a TFSA until the bank earnings reaction clarifies sector rotation direction. The AI infrastructure trade continues to show leadership on the back of fresh NVIDIA developments, which keeps the question of whether CapEx momentum persists squarely in focus for the weeks ahead. Imagine you bought shares in a TSXV mining name the morning after it reported second quarter results and a new equipment financing letter of interest. Your order filled at the open, yet the stock faded by midday. What actually happened is that the headline numbers looked strong, but the letter of interest was non-binding, so institutions that had pre-positioned sold into the retail rush. Reported revenue or project progress moves the stock only when accompanied by binding cash flow visibility. Otherwise, the initial pop is absorbed by earlier buyers locking in gains. Most retail investors skip the fine print on whether the catalyst is binding or aspirational and end up holding the bag after the first hour volume spike. The pro tip is to open the full management discussion and analysis within 30 minutes of the release and check for words like non-binding or subject to final documentation before adding to size. The concrete misconception to avoid is treating every positive headline as equal. The fix is to require at least one line item that converts directly into near-term cash or production, before treating the reaction as confirmed. Troilus Mining announced a non-binding letter of interest from Finvera for up to approximately $132 million in potential export credit support. The press release explicitly labels the letter as non-binding, which means any price reaction must be discounted until further documentation converts the support into a firm commitment. Patagonia Gold reported that a preventive, partial, and temporary suspension at its Calcatrio project in Argentina was lifted after an agreement with the Secretariat of Labor of the province of Rio Negro on hiring and training local workers. That development carries more immediate operational weight because the suspension itself has been removed rather than merely proposed. Blossom Gold released initial bottle roll test results from multiple host rock types at its Rosebud open pit heap leach project in Nevada, with Kappa's, Cassiday, and Associates conducting the program. Those test parameters appear in the release and can be reviewed line by line to assess recovery consistency across oxidized and fresh rock before any valuation adjustment. Astra Exploration qualified to trade on the OTCQX Best Market after upgrading from the OTCQB Venture Market, a step that improves U.S. investor access without requiring a full NYSE listing. Open your brokerage platform, pull up the last 3 earnings releases for any TSXV name you own, and highlight every sentence containing non-binding, subject to, or contingent on. Count how many of those qualifiers appear in the most recent release. Tomorrow, watch for volume reaction on Kraken Robotics after today's earnings filing to see whether the medium confidence setup holds into the next session. That's your modern investing techniques for today. Subscribe, leave a review, and we'll be back tomorrow with more market intelligence. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. Quick tip from the network. Try Fascinating Frontiers next. The most fascinating news from space and science. Every Nara Network show is free at naranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at naranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.
Do you ever wonder where we go after this? Are you high right now? Do you ever get nervous? Do you ever stay awake, counting sheep like all the time? What's your life like? What's your purpose? When's your birthday? What's your sign? Are you down right now? Are you stuck up in the past? Are you still thinking about all the times that you didn't laugh?